I am Angie Ham, a volunteer with AARP Texas, and I am pleased to welcome you to an exciting event that is part of our celebration for Hispanic Heritage Month. Every year from September 15th to October 15th, we take the time to recognize and appreciate all the contributions that Hispanics and Latinos contribute to our communities. And this year, we're celebrating in a big way with a variety of free virtual events. So you'll get a chance to learn about our Brownsville history, cooking, gardening classes, while learning different aspects of self-care that you can work on all from the comfort of your own home. These videos, culinary events, historical readings, and more are among some of our presentations that will bring to life our proud Hispanic culture. I also want to tell you that AARP is here to help you and your families navigate through this pandemic. So we're encouraging you to get the free COVID-19 vaccine so you can protect yourself, your children, your grandchildren. And for many of you, there'll be an opportunity soon to get the booster shot to ensure you stay protected from the deadly coronavirus. We want you to have information that you can trust. Learn more by visiting www.aarp.org/vaccinefacts. Thank you, and let's get on with today's presentation.
So excited to have with us today our special guest, Rolando Garza, who is the park archaeologist and chief resource management officer at the Palo Alto Battlefield, which is part of the National Parks park system. Thank you for being part of being our guest today, Rolando. Today is a big day. We're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month every day here at AARP, and I want to thank you for being part of this with us today.
And I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to represent the Hispanic community.
So you have been in the National Park System for some time now. How did your career begin?
It began actually in the Park Service. I came back to Brownsville. I'd been working about 7 years in the field of cultural resource management as a field archaeologist around the state of Texas, New Mexico, working for consulting companies, including a 3-year stint on a TxDOT cemetery project up in Dallas, Friedman Cemetery. And I kind of came back down here chasing the woman who would become my wife. And I was looking for work in anthropology down here. I talked to Dr. Tony Zavaleta, and he pointed me to the city. I did a little project for him, but I met the resource manager back then, Aaron Marr, who was here at Palo Alto Battlefield. I ended up doing an SCA AmeriCorps internship here at the park, and it kind of helped me get into the Park Service. When in 1998, I would get my first permanent job with the Park Service at the Southeast Archaeological Center. But I got to work in over 40 of the national parks in the Southeast region, including going down to San Juan, Puerto Rico, Dry Tortugas. It prepared me to come back to Brownsville, my hometown, and become the battlefield archaeologist here at the park.
Wow, that's such an interesting career. Archaeology is a rare field that we see very few Latinos in. Have you seen a career shift take over since you were in college and studying this?
Yeah, actually I have. Once I graduated in the 90s and worked in the CRM field, there was one other Hispanic that I knew of, Joe Sanchez, who was out of Laredo working the field. But no, there has a lot. And I want to do a shout out to Dr. Russell Skronik at UTRGV, formerly UT Pan American. he has been preparing and training Hispanics from our community, from Edinburgh mainly, when it was just Pan American, to go out in the field of CRM. And I know quite a few that have made it successfully into the field, which is hard. Usually, you get your bachelor's degree and you work, and usually to stay in the field, you got to make it about 10 years. If you make it 10 years, you'll stay in. But a lot of people don't make it that long because it can be a grueling field and jobs are sparse, and you gotta jump around a lot.
So, Rolando, let's talk about the Palo Alto battlefield. So, how many acres of prairie land are we talking about? And also, what is the significance of this battlefield to U.S. Mexican history?
Palo Alto Battlefield National Historical Park, which is the current name of the park, and first it was National Historic Site, but we expanded in 2009 when we added Resaca de la Palma, which is the battle that took place the day after. The Battle of Palo Alto took place on May 8th, 1846. And right now, our legislative boundary is 3,400 acres. We don't know all of it. There's a large inholding of 1,400 acres still, which contains the eastern terminus of the battlefield, the core battlefield. To give it significance and importance, I like to say, what started here on these fields would lead to events that would forever change the face of the North American continent, with Mexico ceding over half of its national territory to the U.S., and it forged the relationship between these two young republics, which we still have lasting impacts that we're dealing with today. Fort Brown, the earthworks at Fort Brown, which was built in the spring, there was a siege going on from May the 3rd through May the 9th. It ended when the American forces defeated and captured the Mexican camp at Resaca de la Palma. That's when the siege of Fort Brown was lifted. And they're kind of linear. Right now, you leave the front gate of Palo Alto, you drive about 6 miles down Paredes Line Road, and you hit Resaca de la Palma. That was the old road, part of the old road that connected Port Isabel to Matamoros. And then about another 5 miles from Resaca de la Palma is Fort Brown and the river. It's now, they're standing ruins actually at the end of the driving range of the abandoned golf course near the Texas Southmost College and UTRGV campus there.
Now, there's even a old cannon there as well.
Yes. And that cannon is the last of the ones still in its original interment. In 1916 or so, Commander Parker from Fort Brown wanted to commemorate and mark the 4 battlefields associated with the U.S. Mexican War. And there's a skirmish that I haven't mentioned. It's the skirmish is Cadecitos. It happened on April 25th. And that's where a Mexican regiment of cavalry overtook a small scouting party of American dragoons over there about, the cannon that was in place has been moved to a roadside marker near Galveston Ranch, kind of by Los Indios Bridge right now. So it's a little ways down Military Highway. And then the one here in Palo Alto, all the cannons were originally turned with a muzzle facing the sky to denote that a U.S. soldier gave his life in battle there. The ones at Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma have been moved to roadside markers and been moved around. In fact, the summer of 2019, we officially moved the cannon from Paredes Line Road into our park at Resaca de la Palma. The Daughters of the American Revolution had given us that cannon, also the cannon here at the corner of Palo Alto Battlefield.
When we talk about the Palo Alto Battlefield, there are a few players that are significant players in history that happened after Palo Alto. You have General Zachary Taylor. You also have Samuel Ringgold, who also has the fort is named after him in Rio Grande City. So can you talk a little bit about their significance in, at Palo Alto and then at Fort Brown as well?
Well, I'll start with Samuel Ringgold.
Because he played a very instrumental role here too.
Yeah, he was one of the main developers of the new strategy that was first employed at the Battle of Palo Alto. It's called flying artillery, and for the first time, you're having the field artillery being pulled around with horses to where, and they drilled and trained to where they could rapidly reposition around the battlefield during the battle. prior to this, kind of during the Napoleonic style of warfare, the cannons would be brought up to the primary line, the initial battle lines by oxen, and then they were pretty much left in place during the battle. Now, under Ringgold, you could rapidly move around, and it proved very effective here at the Battle of Palo Alto. Unfortunately, for Ringgold's sake, he would be wounded at the Battle of Palo Alto, would die a couple of days later at Fort Polk in present-day Port Isabel. And then for Zachary Taylor was the general. He brought half of the U.S. Standing Army, which is only about 5,000 troops, in the spring of 1846. He started the construction of fort, but Zachary Taylor would eventually become the president of the United States. The reason Palo Alto has such integrity with its archaeological record and its setting is because it's on the end of the coastal prairie, and the soils are very high in salinity, and so it was marginal. Well, it wasn't suited for crop cultivation and marginal for livestock grazing. So that's why the battlefield has been preserved, and why we have an opportunity to restore the cultural landscape. But as Brownsville and the surrounding area continues to grow, this little patch of 3,400 acres is going to be so important to the native species down here, as they're losing habitat all over the place. We have an inventory and monitoring program. There's 8 national parks in it, and we do monitoring protocols. And the whole I&M program is around looking at the vital signs, looking at the health of the ecosystem. So we do Texas tortoise monitor. We have a nice population of Texas tortoise. We have over 300 marked individuals.
When folks visit Palo Alto Battlefield, they can bring their bikes.
Thanks to the City of Brownsville and a Rails to Trails grant, there is a historic battlefield trail that connects Palo Alto to Resaca de la Palma and eventually to Fort Brown downtown. Now it's kind of grown into the Kata Kata Trails project. Right now, the city has got a Federal Highway Administration grant to try and connect Palo Alto Battlefield to the Bahia Grande unit of Laguna Atascosa National Wildlife Refuge. It's all part of the Kata Kata Trails project, which is good. It's a quality of life, and to better the health of the community and give people a chance to get outside into nature and to learn about history too, from coming to the battlefields and other historic sites along the trail.
So, pre-COVID, you would often have meetups at Palo Alto Battlefield with, students that were studying anthropology, and then you would invite other anthropologists from across the state, or archaeologists from around the state, to venture out onto the prairie at Palo Alto. So you could try to see if you could recover, other artifacts and log those findings. So what are some of the interesting finds that some of the students, or you as a archaeologist there at Palo Alto, what are some of the interesting finds that you've made?
One of the coolest things I find, I got to allude to my buddy Chuck Lawson, who's now in Denver. He used to work with me at SEAC. Mm-hmm. We found a mouthpiece of the bugle that was right in place, right in where it should have been on the Mexican line, the initial Mexican line. And because of the historic record, they talk about U.S. cannons focusing on the Mexican band that was there, and they hit it. And so we found the mouthpiece of the bugle. It was kind of telling. But another thing that Chuck always used to say, anytime we had the historic road going through one of our survey quadrants, he said, we're going to find a mini ball. And a mini ball is a bullet from the Civil War period. And we would, every quadrant that had a road, the historic road going through it, we would find a mini ball or some artifact from the Civil War. And just say that during the Civil War, the Rio Grande Delta saw a lot of activity throughout the whole 5-year war.
So during the Palo Alto Battlefield, how many troops were descended upon the battlefield?
There were about 3,200 Mexican troops versus 2,300 U.S. troops.
And so that was a big, we're talking cannons, we're talking,
Yeah, our Palo Alto could be characterized as an artillery duel, and the Americans had the advantage with the flying artillery, and they had two 18-pounders Okay, back then they gauged the gauge of the cannon by the weight of a solid cannonball. So the field artillery were 6-pounders. The Mexican Army had 4 and 8-pound cannons, but they were kind of, the 4-pounders were dragged with the cavalry, but the 8-pounders kind of stayed stationary throughout the battlefield. But we had the flying artillery of 6-pound, and then 2 18-pounders that Taylor had that he was taking to the fort. They weren't really intended for field battle. They were taking it to the fort. He brought up the road and used that. And to me, the 18-pounders and the flying artillery kind of kept the Mexican Army from doing an infantry charge, which they had superior number. But okay, so neither side gave up the field of battle, but the Mexican Army fared a lot worse. So before dawn, the Mexican general Mariano Arista moved his troops down 6 miles down the road to where the road crossed Resaca de la Palma, and he used the natural ravine of the Resaca and the dense vegetation to negate the effects of the American cannons. It was a good plan because Resaca was a more hand-to-hand combat. It was a lot more even. The casualties at Palo Alto were kind of 10-1, while the casualties at Resaca were about even, except that a good portion of the Mexican Army did not get in battle. They were holding their positions, and the Americans didn't engage them. They focused on the western flank of the Mexican Army and eventually penetrated that and captured the Mexican camp. Fleeing the Mexican Army fled into a disorganized retreat and relieving the siege of Fort Brown. There's one interesting thing I like to say. There are actually 4 future presidents that fought at Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. We talked about General Zachary Taylor, who became president, Ulysses S. Grant, and then we have Mariano Arista and Romeo Diaz de la Vega would become presidents for their respective countries.
So Brownsville is notably the second most historic city in Texas. When you look back at our history, especially in Brownsville, what does Hispanic Heritage Month mean to you?
What it means, growing up here, you don't know any better that everybody's not Hispanic when you leave other places. Mm-hmm. But when I went off to college, I got my degree at Austin, and I realized I like to really encourage the kids down here in Brownsville, which is still predominantly Hispanic community, that you can be whatever you want to be. You can do anything. You just got to apply yourself, set your goals, figure out what's most important to your life, set your goals, get your education, and chase after your dreams. And you can do it. You can do it. The only thing preventing you is you.
So I want to reiterate that I thoroughly have enjoyed our first live with you on the Palo Alto Battlefield and its correlation with our U.S. history, U.S. and Mexican history. Next Friday on October 1st, we'll have special guest Larry Loff, who will be here from the Rad Plantation House at the Sabal Palm Sanctuary, and we'll be discussing the history of this beautiful plantation home that was built in 1892 and at one time was surrounded by 20,000 acres of Sabal palms along the Rio Grande River. And you don't want to miss this. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. We look forward to seeing you soon. So this concludes our Facebook Live for this afternoon. Thank you so much.